Welcome back to the channel. 12 Man's back. Gooner to Gooner is back, and it is one of my favourite Gooners. It's Mr. Tom Canton. Tom, how are you, mate? And how is the Gooner Talk TV?
Yeah, it's all good, mate. Very good. Hit 60K. Happy days.
Oh,
So,
mate,
yeah.
listen, there's a massive congratulations
Thanks, man.
straight away then. The big 6-0, mate, we're trying to get for the big 3-0. So we're halfway there, nearly
Man,
halfway there.
it's good
So
growth,
big up
man.
to you, man. Yeah, we hit 25K last week. You hit 60K this week. Great to see good people doing good things, man. Listen, if you haven't already, I don't know where you've been, but make sure you do go over to the Gooner Talk TV and give it a subscribe, and make sure you send them towards 70K now. Tom's there every morning. He's still a madman. I've tried to do it as consistent as I can, and I've struggled. So how he does it, I do not know. I give him a lot of
How is
credit.
it going? Have you missed any yet?
I have missed a couple. Yes, I have. The transfer windows, I didn't miss any, but the morning news
Yeah.
that I do has been more inconsistent. But I tried to get in around about between 8:30 and 9 every morning if I can. Unless there's a show that I do at 10, I normally do save it and do one at 10 o'clock instead. So yeah, fairly inconsistent at times, but the transfer windows was very good and very consistent. But big up to you, man, because you do it 7 days a week. I mean, I was only doing Monday to Friday. You do it Monday to Sunday, which is just insane, mate. So yeah, there's no rest for the wicked, as they say. But how are you, mate? All things good apart from that?
Yeah, not bad. Moved house, hence the new surroundings. So that's been a process, and we're kind of just getting settled. And I tell you what, I've tried to install a Ring doorbell today, and trying to drill the holes in perfect alignment to make it fit, knowing that you're like digging holes in your own house is one of the most stressful things, because the
Mate,
missus is going to come
anything to
back
do
and
with
check if it's
DIY,
straight.
mate. Yeah, I don't do it. I just don't do DIY. I'd rather pay someone. It's less painful and stressful for sure. But no, big up to you, man. I'm glad you settled in the move. And thanks for coming on again, mate. It's been too long, and it's always weird, isn't it? You feel like it's days and then weeks and then months pass by, and it's ages since we spoke about the Arsenal together on here. And look, it's been an interesting few weeks as far as Arsenal are concerned. We've gone through a very difficult fixture list that we are going to talk about. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the reactions, some of the rival fans, about Dark Arts and how Arsenal have played in terms of their style this season, calling it Pulis Paella or whatever it's called, Paella Pulis, sorry, and M&S Tony Pulis football, which has seen us finishing at the moment 1 point off of the top of the table in the international break, same goal difference as Manchester City. So if we're Paella Pulis playing like that, I can't wait till we actually play football, because it's looking pretty good, mate. That's just my opinion. So we're going to get your thoughts on that. We're going to talk about some injury news in terms of the internationals as well, Tom, and then some thoughts going into what is going to be quite an incredibly difficult period of time when we do come back, which is going to be quite a mad fixture list once again. But I've got to start by asking your thoughts on this Manchester City stuff versus the Premier League. I don't really want to go into it too much because I think we can be here forever, but just your kind of understanding of what has happened, just so our viewers can understand it a bit better, because I think there's so much confusion because the mainstream media have done a horrendous job at trying to explain it, in my opinion. So give us a bit of a lowdown into what has actually happened and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, to be honest, mate, like it's one of those where, because it's such like a legal minefield, I find it best to just kind of like go to the people that are going to be more in the
100%.
know about these things. I was talking about it on my show this morning. I mean, the guy I usually go to is Tariq Panja of the New York Times. He's usually pretty good for this sort of thing. And the way he puts it is like, even though there's been these stories coming out that like this is a win for Man City, and Man City have won this legal battle on this particular thing, the more that kind of people delve into it, and it's worth pointing out that like the document that came out about this was like well over 100 pages in length. So the idea that people could write like a verdict based on that document within the hours that were there after it came out was mad. So all the reports that came out like as soon as it dropped were always going to be a little bit significantly kind of vague in regards into their understanding of it, because it's such a huge document that's come out. So I've always kind of been on the side of, sit back, wait and see what other reports come out. And since then, it seems that despite Man City and the Premier League both releasing statements in which they both seem to feel that, they've won their side of the thing, I think with this is all about APT. It's not actually to do with the 115 charges. It could have an impact on that case because of just the way in which it's run. But it's about APT, which is associated party transactions, which is more about kind of sponsorships and, the inflation of certain sponsorships and stuff like that. And some of the Premier League rules have been deemed unlawful, which is where Man City have kind of claimed their victories. But the reality is that doesn't mean that APT is not going to exist anymore. It means that it basically will revert at the moment to what it looked like in 2021. Basically, the Premier League tried to implement some stricter versions of these rules, which has been found to be unlawful, is my understanding of it. And, then just voicing my opinion on it. But that reversion doesn't mean the Premier League can't then, in the future, again, try and implement further stricter rules that will be deemed, lawful. So I think in the grander scheme of the whole 115, which is the main thing we want to kind of get averted on, this is kind of very, off of that track. So I wouldn't get too invested too much in this. It may end up mattering more further down the line as more information and more views come out on it. But for now, I think it's I don't think it's like as groundbreaking as what was
No.
being made out by kind of the Man City angle yesterday.
Yeah, certainly when you're running around like you want a trophy, it's quite embarrassing, really, from Man City fans, to be fair. Some of them, not all of them. But look, I think it's going to open up some new rules that will come in place, and I'm sure the conversations will take place. Look, what I can see has happened is there's no winning or losing here. Man City have tried to do something. Premier League have said you can't do it. They've said, actually, we think we can. Let's go and talk about that a bit more. Then they've realised, actually, yeah, you're right. The rule doesn't quite make sense. Let's go back to the drawing board. That's basically what's happened in 24 hours, but you wouldn't know it. You would think, oh my God, what has gone on here? This is incredible. And now, Tom, Arsenal's name's being thrown in the mix. Brighton, Chelsea, Newcastle, all of the infighting between clubs is absolutely insane. It really is. But this is football nowadays. And look, I remember growing up in the 90s and 2000s believing that £15 million for Alan Shearer was mental money. And then quite quickly we realised a couple of decades later that's absolute pennies. You won't even get a fullback for that these days. So look, football has definitely changed. But I do believe that we're in a situation where money is actually becoming a problem now. And it's actually causing more problems than we even imagined when we were in the 80s and 90s. So that's just my opinion, though, of course. And look, I don't want to go too far into it because, as we say, it's all stuff that I don't know enough of. I got into this game to talk football, not finances. So that's what
I think. Just to kind of, because I can sense you're going to round off on this, but I think like kind of a nice bookend to it is Simon Leaf, who is a partner and head of sport at law firm Miscon de Rea, spoke to BBC Sport, and he said, whilst the decision will be embarrassing for the Premier League because in a couple of narrow areas their rules have been found to be unlawful, generally speaking, the decision confirms that the vast majority of these rules are indeed lawful. Therefore, whilst we can expect to see some change to the rules going forwards, on the whole, this isn't a resounding victory for Manchester City by any stretch of the imagination. So that comes from someone who's actually clued into the law side of it. So, yeah.
No, it's interesting. And I think Manchester City fans have probably just got overexcited, as they probably would because of everything surrounding the club at the moment, when really we just need to know the facts. And that's all I want from this 115 as well, I will say, by the way, because I hate talking about it. I know nothing about it. I've not read the 98-page cast document. I've got no interest in reading it. I do not want to know what has, my opinions of it are. My opinions are quite simple, really. If they've done something wrong, they'll get a punishment. If they haven't, we crack on to the weekend's game. That's honestly black and white as I see it. I just think it's mad that we're talking about what should happen and where they should go. They should be relegated. Their title should be stripped. I don't really care, man. Let's see what they've done wrong first, right? That's where I'm at with it. But look, enough about Man City. Let's talk about us, mate. Let's go to the international break yet again, which is where we are now. I've got to say, mate, I hate it. I absolutely hate it with a passion. One, because I don't get to see my mates and my family over the weekends at football and don't stop enjoy going to football, but also because it just pains me to watch Arsenal players not playing for Arsenal that could get potentially injured in what is such a piled up fixture period and an important season. And we have now got Erdegaard's injury, but we now got Havertz and Partey that, of course, we need to talk about. So what can you tell me about those three players? What do you know about Erdegaard and his return date? What do you know about Partey and Havertz and how bad they might be injured in apostrophes?
Well, Erdegaard's quite unknown still. They've kept this very quiet in terms of kind of, any kind of prognosis on how far away he is. I mean, in the last update that Arteta gave, he even talked about a boot. He mentioned like a boot still being potentially worn, so that doesn't bode too well. What we do know about Odegaard is that, he works exceptionally hard whenever he is out injured, and his recovery pace is usually pretty good. So I hope that we see him, in this next period of games between October and November, and I hope that he can make a return then. Obviously, it's quite a well-timed international break, even though we hate it because we have a number of players out that can use this time to try and recover from their injuries. But Erdegaard, it's still a little bit of a question mark about when we might see him. But we've coped well in his absence, to be fair. So, that's a positive. On Partey, suggestions on Charles Watts reported this morning that it's more illness than injury, which is good. So that seems like it will be a short-term thing. And then obviously Havertz is said to be a knee issue. I mean, I saw him after the game against Southampton walking past us in the mix zone, and I would never have kind of, I know it's hard to see some injuries sometimes just by someone walking past you, but I wouldn't have thought there was an issue the way that he was. So if it's precautionary, it's very, good of, kind of both the club and I suppose DFB as well to turn around and say that they need to take a kind of a period of rest for Havertz. He's played a lot of football and they don't want to overwork it. So it seems Partey and Havertz hopefully be fine for the next run of games. Odegaard, we don't really know.
Yeah, it's interesting on Erdegaard, and when he mentioned that boot, I was kind of like, oh no, that doesn't sound good. And it sounds like it could be late November at the very earliest from Erdegaard, which I kind of thought it would be anyway. Marino coming back was actually a bonus, but I was quite shocked and surprised at how quickly he did come back. Thomas Partey, I've got to say, Tom, I've actually been quite pleasantly surprised at how much football he's played already for Arsenal so far. And, we used to Partey getting crocked, and maybe I've jinxed it now, but he's saying now that he's unwell, that it's medical issues. Kai Havertz, I mean, let's be real, he's been very, very versatile for us and very, very durable, I would say, Kai Havertz, in terms of his injuries. So I think these two will be fine after the international break. I hope that Erdegaard is back as well. I wanted to ask you, how do you think we've coped without Erdegaard so far?
Yeah, I think we've coped well. I think Leandro Trossard's done a good job, in that position. And I think we've still been lethal. Still think we've created plenty of opportunities. But we've definitely missed him. Like, there are games in which you just know that we create certain openings in games where had we had Erdegaard, the chance would be of far greater quality. Or, there are certain moments in attacking phases where a ball is played that usually we'd have Erdegaard in certain gaps that would have opened up opposition sides a lot more effectively. So I think that had Erdegaard been available during this period, we would have arguably won, all of the games we played. Especially, I think about that Atalanta away game. I'm sure that with Erdegaard in the team, we would have had a much better chance of creating a goal in that one. Less so the Man City game. Like, I don't necessarily think we necessarily missed him there because it was a very tactical game that didn't really require him to be there. The Spurs game as well, we relied upon, in the end, it being our set pieces that deliver us the 3 points in that match. And maybe if Erdegaard was there, we would have been a lot more comfortable. He's got a really good record in North London derbies, so that, and he scored at the new stadium as well and was responsible for that 2-0 when we had there a couple of seasons ago. So we know he's vital for those games. And obviously against Leicester and Southampton, we've somewhat in the second half of games dipped at the beginning, and we've let Leicester get 2 goals. We've seen Southampton take the lead, and Odegaard, it should be discounted kind of his captaincy and his the kind of the mental side of the game for the team, and having someone who's effectively like having Arteta on the field almost. That those dips that we've experienced in the second half, perhaps you could argue that had our normal captain been on the field, that may not have happened in the same way because of the kind of that mental side and the audible level of what a captain can bring to the team as well. So we've coped well in his absence, but my goodness me, we're going to be very, very good when he comes back.
Yeah, look, I'm really looking forward to that, and that's a nice segue into what I need to ask you. Going to be doing a show with Julian about what we believe our kind of best 11 is. And I wanted to ask you about that because I think when everybody is fit, we're going to see a very different Arsenal. And I would argue to say, actually, last season, we couldn't get our best midfield on the pitch, Partey, Rice and Odegaard. And so far, we haven't been able to get our best midfield on the pitch, Rice, Odegaard, and we believe Marino. So, look, we've got strength in depth in certain areas. I think we've got depth in every position on the pitch now. Whether it's adequate depth, we'll come to in a minute. But actually, when you look at all the players now, what are you expecting to see moving forward in terms of a backline, midfield and front three, Tom?
I think it depends upon the opponent to a degree, as well. And when Ben White and Timber are both back from their injury, that dynamic on the right-hand side is going to be very interesting to look to. Because I think that, if we had a Champions League game, say tomorrow, final of the Champions League was tomorrow, and you had to pick from the available players who your best team is, I think that both Ben White and Timber would probably start for me. Timber on the left, Ben White on the right. Even though Calafiori's been great, I think in those types of really big occasions, I'd lean towards having Timber with White in the team to give me more defensive security in a way. And that's not to say that Calafiori's not been good defensively. I just rank Timber's ability that highly in that regard. And having both of those players, I think, would bring a balance that we've needed. I also think that, against Bournemouth away from home, say, which is our next game, if Ben White and Timber are available, it could be Timber and Calafiori, because then we could use, more of the progressive style that we've seen from both of those players. So it is dependent upon the opposition. I think Partey is in a bit of trouble with Miko Moreno coming back. So I think gradually he will establish himself in the team, and Partey will have to make do with perhaps less minutes on the field, which isn't necessarily a too bad of a thing. It might end up protecting him somewhat from the recurring injuries that he, seemingly gets every season. And I think that moving Rice back into that number 6 role is going to be more beneficial for the team in the long run. If you think about the start of last season, we got so many man of the match performances from Rice playing at the number 6 role. It wasn't him playing in that midfield role, because Havertz was playing in that role at the start of the season. So I can't wait to see that happen. I can't wait for Rodri. Sorry, I always say Rodri because I see Rice as being our Rodri, and I see him being that figure in the team, being that anchor for us in the long term. And I want him to be as important as Rodri has been for City. And I think he can do that when he gradually progresses in that number 6 position for us. Moreno is exciting for a number of reasons. Progression is a big one. But another one is obviously that teams will latch on to how good we are from set pieces. I mean, I did an article yesterday talking about, we're recording this on Tuesday, I did an article yesterday where I watched, when I was at the game, all 14 of our set pieces against Southampton to see what we did. And because you might have remembered Russell Martin spoke ahead of the game saying that we've dedicated a lot of time and analysis to trying to stop their set pieces. And we didn't have a real chance from any of them, to be fair. Gabriel only got on the end of one of them in the 96th minute of the game. So what they did was they put 2 players on Gabriel, which other teams haven't really done. We've seen him beat, Kyle Walker. We've seen him beat Christian Romero. But Southampton put 2 players on him, and that really stifled Arsenal to a degree. But now with Moreno in the team, who ranked as one of the best, if not the best, aerial dual-winning midfielder in La Liga and in Europe's top 5 leagues last season, it adds another element to those set pieces that teams are going to have to deal with. So Nicholas Yerver over this international break, I'm sure he's going to be using his witch's cauldron to come up with another set piece tactic that's going to bamboozle the opposition. So that's really exciting, I think, with Moreno coming into the side as well.
Yeah, facts, man. And look, we've got to talk about Havertz and Saka, because the telepathy between these two of late has been phenomenal. Saw him against PSG, and I thought they were 2 of our better players, along with Trossard. Also against Southampton in that second half, as soon as Havertz went to that 9, we just looked completely different. Not only did he score straight away, but Saka started to come into the game and link up play with him. And I just think he's probably one of our most important players now, Havertz. And I think, from my point of view, when I was looking at him coming into Arsenal, I raised my eyebrows, saw him in midfield and thought, this is awful. Was ready to give up on him and thought he was a really poor player. And then I look at him now and I think, you were a 9 all along. Saka, likewise, I don't know what more this kid has to do to get more respect from players, from rival fans. It's just embarrassing. 9 GA in 7 games. It's absolutely phenomenal. And people say just a bit of a corner taker now. It's quite phenomenal, really, how Chelsea fans in particular see that, this Cole Palmer comparison, because for me, they don't even play in the same position anymore. Look, I've got to mention about them too, mate, because I've been very impressed in the last few games, Tom.
I mean, Saka in particular has just taken the armband, I think, in particular since Ødegaard's been out, and really used that as kind of a boost for him and his confidence, because there's always so much expectation and pressure around him that people forget how young he still is. And he's not a player in his 28, 29, in his prime of his, he's 23. And he's been at the top level of his game for 6 years now. A huge amount of experience. I mean, just having a quick look at, how many games he's already played at the senior level, and you have a look at some of the numbers behind them. He's played 236 games for Arsenal's, across all comps, which is incredible for a 23-year-old to have done at that level. I mean, Declan Rice has played over 300 games, in the Premier League as well, since breaking onto the scene. It's stunning the amount of experience these young guys pick up. Even though we've got a relatively young side, the experience there is still huge. Saka's creativity has gone to another level. And I think that's needed to happen with Ødegaard out of the side as well, because you lack a creator in him being there. And Trossard's more of a direct figure, but he is slightly adjusting. I mean, a good stat to look at is the fact that Jesus, who we might come on to in a bit, created 3 opportunities against Southampton in the period of time he was on the pitch. Trossard came off the bench and produced 5. So, that's kind of the level that you're looking at in the change that Trossard's bringing to the team as well. So, just to link now to Havertz. Havertz is a player that, I was always worried that could be the guy that Arteta falls on his sword for in some ways when he arrived at the club, because it was a lot of money and we all questioned it. Somebody myself, I know people view me as a big Arteta kind of like, backer in that. But I was there probably here, with you, Dan, saying, I'm not sure. I think one of the lines I talked about was, I didn't think we needed a project player last summer. I thought we needed a player that was ready. We talked about James Maddison a lot. We had a good bet about James Maddison last season. I'd just like to pick that up. But that was the type of ready-made player that a lot of us wanted to see brought in, not a player that needed to be, cared for and, kind of brought back into form. But what a reward we've got by doing that and by going for Havertz. 7 Emirates games in a row. Competitively, he's now scored it. I know it was a very fortunate goal against Leicester that he got, but that record is very, very good. He's scoring against big sides like PSG, and getting results like that really matter. It's important that he gets on the score sheet regularly, and it's important that he still contributes outside of just goal scoring, because he's not just there to be a focal point and to score goals. He's there to be a team player and to collaborate, and he does all those things really, really well.
No, he does, man. And look, I mean, I think he scored goals and assisted for both Chelsea and Arsenal now, but in 47 games less, he's pretty much equaled already what he did at Chelsea. That just shows you what Mikel Arteta has got out of him and that new position that he's been allowed to thrive in. And I think that long may that continue, man, because it's been fantastic and phenomenal to see how he has improved. I wanted to mention our left-hand side, though, Tom, because it's been really interesting for me to see Martinelli's game in the last few improve. I was really worried about Martinelli at the back end of last season, and to be fair, it has to be said at the start of this season. But actually, with Calafiori coming in and Marino coming in now, I looked at Martinelli's game and it just seemed to improve a hell of a lot, mate. And I've got to say, I'm with you. I think Rice has to be a 6, has to be our Rodri. And I think when we do get these players fit, and that's why I mentioned when everyone's fit, what does it look like? Calafiori, Rice, Marino, and then Martinelli with Havertz. That left-hand side is then starting to look good. And the biggest compliment I can probably give Arsenal over the weekend's game against Southampton was that our left-hand side looked as good in the second half as our right-hand side. Now, I know that we've got more joy on our right-hand side because Saka and Havertz have been brilliant, but Martinelli was looking very, very good. And I've been really impressed with his individual performances improving in the last few games. And I just wonder if that left-hand side is going to allow him to flourish a bit more.
Yeah, I think that Martinelli, you could see the weight lift off his shoulders when he scored against Leicester. It was like, you could literally see it. Like, I think there was a chance either side of him scoring. He went onto the left-hand side, left-footed shot over the bar. He scored. He had another opportunity and he smashed the keeper's gloves. Like, yes, he didn't score that chance, but just getting it on target is an element and evidence that he's in, that confidence is there and improved somewhat. And then, of course, he got an assist in that game as well. And then, of course, comes off the bench in this one against Southampton. I spoke to him after the game against Southampton and asked him, saying, like, do you kind of understand the need for rotation? Because it must be frustrating. You got back into form and now you're being put on the bench. And, he gets it. He said he doesn't like to be on the bench. No player likes to be on the bench, but he understands that rotation is necessary and that Sterling did well when he played. But you want that hunger and desire from him, because I talk about often that he's a rarity in an Arteta squad because he wasn't signed by Arteta. He's one of the few players that, that wasn't signed by him and stuck it out. Whereas so many players that we thought would make it, like, Kieran Tierney, even Granit Xhaka to an extent, these players have been moved on from. We've moved past them. But Martinelli has stayed, strong in that position and continue to develop, and not only develop, but he delivers defensively, which makes him such an asset. Like he was at Manchester City, was one of our best players in that game. And against PSG, to a degree, he showed that too. So him going forwards, going backwards, it's all there for him. And he still has the world at his feet. And like Saka, still a very young player with so much more to give. And I hope that this form now continues. He's going to be with Brazil, which he missed out on the last squad. He's back in this squad, and playing, which is obviously going to be beneficial for him. And hopefully he comes back fitter and firing and ready in that. But he is a really important player, and one that I think people maybe, even including myself in this, write him off a little bit too quickly sometimes.
Yeah, I agree. And look, Martinelli, for me, one of my favourite players, still one of the most exciting when he's on the ball. I love his tenacity and the fact that he's got a never say die attitude. He gives 110%. It's just been goals for me. I'd like him to get his head up a bit more. But look, he's a player that I think when he gets a goal, I think the rest will continue. Unlucky not to score in the last couple of games as well, to be fair to him. So he's getting the right positions now, and certainly the left-hand side will help him. Look, I've got to say, when Odegaard does come back, where does it leave Leandro Trossard? Because I think he's been too good to drop out the side completely. I mean, he's been phenomenal in that 10 role, to be fair. Against PSG, I thought he was outstanding. And he has been good since Odegaard's been out. It's great competition. We've spoken about Ben White and Timber having this kind of scenario as well. Ethan Wanyeri coming on as well. It looks now as if perhaps, when I said I think we need another attacking midfielder, Fabio Vieira and Smith Rowe going, we've actually got some cover now because Trossard's played there. I just did not see it happening. I thought he was going to be out and out a winger or maybe a 9. Where does it leave Trossard? Do you think he'll be one of the most versatile players that comes in and out, or do you think he'll start on the left? What do you think will happen with Leo?
Well, the difference with Leo is obviously he's one of our more experienced figures in the team. And when he was kind of signed as a player that was there to, reinforce the already existing quality of Martinelli to a degree in the side. He played a lot of centre forward when Jesus was out during that first season that he came in January as well. I remember he started and got 3 assists against Fulham away from home. And that game he played at centre forward and, looked really good. So we know that he's got versatility and we know the quality he's got. We also know that coming off the bench, he is really potent. He may want to start games and he may celebrate at Aston Villa after scoring from the bench as if he should be starting, but he continues to be really lethal when he comes off the bench. And that is definitely something that you can lean on and definitely something that you should look to as a positive. And when you get to kind of 29, 30, you have to, in some ways, be somewhat humble to recognize that, you are part of a team. You're part of the squad. And there are younger players that are going to get opportunities over you at times. And when your opportunities come, you have to try and take them. You're still going to start certain games. You're still going to be brought on a regular occasion because you're seen as an important figure in the squad. But there is an acceptance in a way that this is a team game. And of course, individuality is not necessarily something that Arteta likes too much in his groups. And I think Trossard to a degree has taken that on, even though there is a sense of that he thinks he should be starting more. But when he does start games, he doesn't always deliver as consistently as he does when he doesn't start games. And I think that he does more so than I think people give him credit for, but his record coming off the bench still remains stronger than that of when he starts. And if he wants to change the rhetoric and change Arteta's view, then that stat would have to change dramatically too.
Look, we've spoken about strength in depth and the fact that we've actually got good decisions for Mikel Arteta to make. Believe it or not, January is actually not far away when you think about how quickly this season's going. There's a lot of talk about Manchester City dipping into the market because Rodri's been injured. There's a lot of talk about Liverpool who still feel that they need a couple of positions that they didn't get in the summer. Is there a chance Arsenal could strengthen in January, in your opinion, Tom? And if so, what areas do you think?
I think there's absolutely a chance they could, and it will rely heavily upon the availability of options out there. What we know about Arsenal is that they never sign players for the sake of signing players. They just won't do it. Just because they need another centre forward or they need a midfielder or they need a defender, it doesn't mean they will go out and just sign one. We did that at the start. Of this project, of this process, we went out and just got Cedric because we needed a defender at that time and there wasn't anyone else. We went out and got Pablo Mari. We went out and got Willian. And those are transfers that still get held to a degree against Edu and Arteta, despite the fact that we've shown considerable learning from those times and have a much better transfer record, in fact, a transformative transfer record since those times. But that's not something that I want to go back to. And so if Arsenal see that there is a genuine option on the market that they believe is definitely going to be beneficial to their squad and they can do it financially, I believe they will go and do it. We know that they had a summer that has been effectively net zero for them. They've made a lot of money with sales. They've not spent huge sums of money like they had in previous windows where we signed Rice and Havertz and Timber and Ray are all in the same window. We had a good window where we sold Nketiah, sold Smith Rowe, sold Ramsdale, got good money in for those players and other, smatterings of sell-on clauses and other youth players being sold like Mika Bireth and Brook Norton-Cuffy and players like that. So they are in a healthy position financially. What it does mean, though, obviously, is if they do spend any money during that January window, that'll count towards the current kind of cycle of PSR. And they may wish instead to kind of hold back that money for the next cycle of PSR in the summer, because I think they've always viewed, and I've talked about this on TGT a lot, 2025 for me has always been seen as a really opportunistic year where Pep Guardiola's question mark about his future, where Manchester City in general a bit of a question mark, where we've just signed Arteta up to a brand new contract and there's stability there. We've got other players who have signed new deals and there's stability there. And, there are players that we signed 1 or 2 years ago that are now fully established and settled in the Premier League. And so that summer, I think, has been always identified and targeted as a really big window where maybe they add the 1 or 2 Alisson, Salah, Van Dijk type signings that, our level is not for me about going to the next level, winning it. I believe we're already at a level where we can win the league, but it's maybe about just taking that one player that, I try and avoid saying the word "take us to the next level" because I think we are there, and I think we're a
Mm.
side that is established as a title challenger. But just that player as well that reinforces the existing quality that's there and really does tip it over so the squad's kind of got depth of competitive nature in the centre forward role and the midfield role. Because there are going to be players that leave, Jorginho
Yeah.
and Partey, Zinchenko, Jesus. All of a sudden, you're down 4 players, and then you're going to have to overhaul the squad again. So I think there's going to be a careful nature about it. And there's young players coming through, of course, like Waneri and Lewis Skelly. But January, yeah, I think if they see a player that they think will improve the squad and it's an opportunity, I think, I don't think they'll hesitate too much if they're convinced by them.
Yeah, I think, look, taking us to the next level, I think I'd use the words get us across the line. And maybe you
Yeah.
do need that extra player to get you across the line and to do as you say. Look, I don't know who's going to be leaving. We've got way too much time to talk about that in the coming months about what looks at our season. But I did want to touch on a couple of players that we think might have their futures up for grabs. Certainly Raheem Sterling and Gabriel Jesus are the two that I'm talking about. Now, I haven't been too impressed, Tom, but I'm willing to give him more time, particularly with Gabriel Jesus. I just think it's been a bad time for him at the moment. And I look back at the signing, Tom, and I must say this sounds really harsh. I think he's been a flop, bro. And I'll tell you why. 50 million pounds spent on him. Most of the season that he has been with us, he's been injured for a large part of it. I don't think he's been that killer instinct, and I don't think he's taken us to a next level. I actually think Arsenal have outgrown him. And I think that when we bought him, and I said this on a fan cam at the weekend,
Yeah.
we weren't going for a title. We were going for a top 4, in my opinion, anyway, that season. It was amazing that we were in a title, but I think it shocked
Yeah.
everybody. Now that we found ourselves title challenging, I think like Man City did, we have now outgrown of Gabriel Jesus and potentially some of the others like Zinchenko that's mentioned before. And I just wonder where his future lies. Is his future back in Brazil or Saudi Arabia? Does he go to another team abroad? Or does he have a future at Arsenal that you feel can be a squad player? Because I just don't know that I see it with Gabriel Jesus, mate.
I understand why you hold the view that he's flopped at Arsenal. I think it might be a stretch too far saying he's a flop or has been a flop at Arsenal. I wouldn't say that he's been like a wild success, but I think that he's done. I think that money has helped to take us to where we wanted to go. In that summer we signed Jesus, we signed Zinchenko, we signed Vieira in that 2022 window. And, the season prior to that was the Amazon season that we just missed out on the top 4. That following season with Jesus in the team started off that season very, very well. He started off that season very well as well before he got the injury, at the World Cup. And I think that his role in that season was still certainly very important in the games that he played and helped us to not easily, comfortably qualify for the Champions League, which, as I agree with you, at the start of that season, the target was top 4. It was a surprise that we were in a title race. It wasn't like an expectation that we were going to compete for the title. Some fans say that, every season we should be doing that, and I respect that view. But realistically, that season, we were looking at top 4 as being the target and getting back into the Champions League. And who knows, maybe of winning a trophy as well, of course, on the side, as we always aim to do. But that season, of course, Jesus contributed significantly, I feel, with his performances. I remember that game at Stamford Bridge, when we won 1-0, Gabriel, ironically, again, at a Big Six team, scoring a header. He was unbelievable in that game at Stamford Bridge. He was excellent. Despite not scoring or assisting, his performance was ridiculous. And it was that game when I was like, yeah, like that's, I can finally kind of see that's the centre forward that Arteta wants. He doesn't want a traditional number 9 that is just about goals. He wants a striker or a centre forward or a false nine, or however you want to describe them, that is a collaborative team player that, yes, gets goals here and there, but mainly collaborates. Now, sadly for Jesus, the injuries that he suffered and the subsequent interruptions to his recoveries has seen his form dip considerably so. And that's why we signed Havertz. It was always thought that Havertz was a midfielder. I always, in the end, saw him being that centre forward because I said this time and time when we've had chats, Dan, and I know you've agreed with me, his best position has never been in midfield. His best role, even though that's where he came and impressed at Bayer Leverkusen, but get him into the box, get him into those areas, and he will find the goal. He will be lethal, and he will create opportunities for others like Arteta wants his centre figure to do. So with Jesus, you're right. We outgrew him. And that's a good thing, because Jesus took us to the next point, which was getting established in the Champions League and to a degree, establishing ourselves as title challengers. We have now outgrown Jesus, and that's fine. Sometimes you spend £45 million on a centre forward just to take you to that next step. And then you spend £65 million and bring the next guy in that takes over that role. And that's okay because you need to spend that money on the process along that project. And I still believe it was a necessary signing. I wouldn't go as far as saying it was a flop. I wouldn't say it was a wild success, but I wouldn't say it was a failure either.
Listen, I love the fact you've touched on strikers there, and I do agree. I think Gabriel Jesus had a really good game last season on the right wing at home to Manchester City. I thought he was phenomenal there. It's one of the better games that I've seen him.
He's
And
good
I
away
just
from
feel
home
like
at City as well. He played on the left.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I just wonder if he's a wide man. Look, I do think
Oh,
he's
I
got
think
a
he is.
great ability about him. I don't think he's great clinical in front of goal. I just feel like it could be his last season in an Arsenal shirt. But listen, maybe Mikel Arteta sees a future for him for sure. Let me close by asking. A lot of the viewers will want to know your thoughts on this. We've spoken about the striker scenario. Jesus, question marks at the moment, whether you're a
Yeah.
fan or not. Havertz at the moment is looking like our number 9, and rightly so he should be. If there was a striker to come in next, whether it's in the January transfer window or if it's in the summer, what do you think that striker might look like? I'm going to throw some names at you as well in a
Mhm.
minute, but what do you think we might go for profile wise next?
I still think they need to be physically, very good because Arteta wants bruisers. He wants
Yeah.
players that can dominate opposition players. And I think that's maybe like at the time we were only going back to Jesus, he came in and we still had a
Mm.
relatively technical team at that point as well. We'd not yet evolved into the beasts that we have now. So it will, I think, be a player that is a lot more, physically adept, but also someone that needs to have that technical ability about them that can take players on, that can, control the ball well, has got good touch. But I think it will be someone that they look at and go, ultimately, we are going up against a very young, still Erling Haaland every single season at Manchester City. We need somebody to come in who can also deliver 30 goals. Arteta talks about it all the time. Like he says, we haven't got a 30 goal a season striker. And the obvious thought in our minds is, we'll go get one then, because that would be great if we could add that to the team. So the problem has been that we haven't necessarily thought there is that guy there, and available on the market that's going to take you to that next level, that can guarantee you not just, those goals, but also guarantee you that they're going to be available. Because while you've got players that have been on the market like Victor Osimhen, he's had injury issues. So you never necessarily want to commit 100 million plus to someone like that when you don't know they're going to be available. Alexander Isak is the same, came into Newcastle and has also had injury issues. Kai Havertz, even though ironically is currently out at the moment, has never really had any injury issues whilst at Arsenal. And you look at the lot of players that we've got now, Saka, like never injured. Rice, never injured. These players that we've got in the team, Saliba, Gabriel, never injured. And I'm touching wood a lot while saying these words. But I think that physical reliability is definitely got to be something that we look to in that next player, as well as having those traits on the ball that I talked about.
Let me do it. Let me chuck
Do it.
some names here.
Can I guess them? I can guess them if you
Yeah,
like.
that's a good idea. Go on then. Go on
So
then.
I think Gyökeres will be one of them.
Yeah.
The other one, it's not still Ivan Toney, Dan. It's that ship sailed, mate. I'm
No,
sorry.
that's sailed. That's done. We can move on from that one.
Isak, I think, will probably be another one.
That's correct. Yep.
And then maybe Sheshko.
Yeah, well
Yeah,
done. All three correct, mate. I mean, listen, we know each other well, but that is
yeah.
quite impressive, Tom. I must say. Give me your thoughts on the three of them, because I know that we're not going to get all three of them, but it would be nice
Of course,
to
yeah.
look at those sort of targets coming in. Sesko's been linked heavily before. Obviously, Victor Gyökeres is wanted by some of the fan base. I think majority of the fan base want Isak as number one, but I might be wrong. So give me your thoughts on these three, man.
Yeah, I'll start with Isak. I think that obviously he's the trickiest by a long way to go and get, because Newcastle already being in the Premier League, even though they have some relative pressures from kind of PSR, I think overall that it'll be very difficult to get Isak out the door, and it would cost a humongous fee to do it. He also is relatively happy. However, if Newcastle finish outside of the European places again this season, that might be enough to say, look, if you're Isak's agent, he's what, 20? He's 25. He'll be 26 in September of next year. that's the age where you need to be making that
Mm.
move, to that club. Maybe you could delay it another season, but maybe then the ship would have sailed for you if you don't have another good season for Newcastle. But, I think that it's kind of next summer, maybe your bust for the move on Isak, because it's such a good time in his career to do that move. And if not, then he probably has to sign a new deal with Newcastle and, stay for the foreseeable. I think it'd be an excellent signing, but I think it would cost a hell of a lot of money to get done. And Newcastle might even ask for a Premier League record fee, to get that deal through the door. But it's not, say, something that Arsenal, after their net zero summer this year, couldn't necessarily perhaps muster. So who knows? Gyökeres was the one that I always looked at and thought, I need another season from you before
Mm.
I'm convinced to spend your release clause, which is, I believe, still £84 million. Some people would have jumped now, which I respect, and he's paying off those that I think would have jumped. He's not been as consistent, it's worth pointing out. He scored a fair few penalties this season, which I think have stat padded his numbers a little bit throughout this campaign. But he's still delivering consistently, both with goals and assists. He still ranks in the 97th percentile of, strikers in the top 14 competitions outside the top 5 leagues, which is an incredible stat still. He possesses great athleticism, really good physicality. He's good in the air. He's a lethal finisher. From what we've seen over the past 12 to 18 months. So again, £84 million. If he does what he did last season again this season, I think probably a no-brainer. And then Šeško is probably the kind of the hipster's choice a little bit, maybe, because obviously he's 21 years of age. He's still very young, very raw, much rawer than both of Gyökeres and Isak, but would perhaps be cheaper than them. I don't know the value of his new release clause. He did sign a new contract after no one signed him in the summer, and that was a release clause, I think, of 55 million. I imagine it's gone up, but I don't know how much it's gone up by. No one's reported that so far. He started like Gyökeres, he started the season well again. He scored consistently throughout the campaign, and he is also physically, very, appealing. Huge player, not slow either. He's got pace about him, and he's excellent in the air. So I think that any of those three, I'd rank them in Isak, Gyökeres, Šeško would be my order. But I think if Arsenal were to land any of those three next summer, that could be constituted as good business by the club.
Listen, it's the same order as me. Isak's been my number one for a long time. I actually wanted him when he was at Sociedad, and I thought Newcastle got a fantastic player there. Gyökeres I followed when he was at Coventry because I just heard about this guy I'd not heard of before. I couldn't even say his name. I think I was called him Gokores or something when he
I
first
think we all did, yeah.
Gores or Gores. I think I called him Ingores or something mad like that. I was like, that Gores is good from Coventry. And then he moved over to Lisbon and I heard how good he was. And I thought, whoa, what's happening over there? You're right to give him another season, and he started very, very well. I think with Šeško, I wasn't impressed when I saw him at the Euros, and I know that's not something to go off because obviously he needs to go through a more consistent Premier League season or a Bundesliga than opposed to a kind of tournament competition. But certainly has some attributes as well. I think we do need to buy another striker. Now, whether it's in January or the summer, I think it absolutely needs to happen. And if any of those names were to come, I'd be willing to give them 100% a chance, but I'd actually be excited by more than half of them. So look, I'm in a position right now where I think we do need a striker, and I hope it does happen. I'm not going to say we absolutely definitely need one to get across the line. That's just my opinion, but I don't think it's a definite. I think we can still win the league, but I think that I'd have more confidence if we were to go and get somebody in that box that's an absolute killer, like an Isak. You kind of know it's a goal when he's running through, or it's coming across the box, it's going in. Sometimes with Havertz and Jesus, I'm still not putting my house on them 100% putting it at the back of the net. And I think until we get that player that can do that, I think we may always just feel short. But I could be wrong, mate. I've been wrong many times before, as you know. So let's see what happens. Tom, absolute pleasure having you on, mate. I really do respect you coming on, mate. And thank you so much. Shout out what you're up to and how people can follow you, mate.
Thanks, mate. Always a pleasure. Yeah, I am found at the Gooner Talk, as always. You can find my videos every single day at 8 a.m. Without fail, every single day. It's a challenge, it's a task, but we love it. We've got a great community over there. So, it's a pleasure and it's enjoyable, as it is joining you every single time, Dan. So thanks for having me, mate.
Nah, come on, man. You're always welcome here, and it'll be great to come on a Guna Talk again soon. So we'll have to arrange that as well and do another collab. Big up to everybody that's been in listening. Make sure you hit the like button and subscribe, and you're following both myself and Tom as well. Make sure you're over at the Guna Talk. If you need any news go to Tom's channel, the Gooner Talk TV. Please make sure you do that. Big up to all of you. We'll see you on the next one, and take it easy. We're out of here, people. Peace.